So I want to walk you through the ideal setup for working on programming on your own personal machine, which would involve setting up Visual Studio 2019 with the .NET Core framework so that you can create and run your own projects on your personal machine. So there's a Canvas page that explains how to set up Visual Studio 2019, but I'm going to walk you through it using a virtual machine so you can see what the install looks like from start to finish. So if you go to visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads, if you're on a Windows machine, then you'll grab this one, Community, which is free. And if you're on a Mac, you want to grab Visual Studio for Mac, which is down here. So I'm going to flip over to a virtual machine and download Community. I'm going to pause the video and come back when this has finished. All right, the installer finishes and then pops open this window that lets you customize what packages are installed in your version of 2019. So the one that you're going to need for Intro to Programming is this .NET Desktop development workload. So if you check this, you'll see down at the bottom the total space required will go up. And when we're ready, we can hit install. There's one more thing that I want to show you. If you click on the individual components tab and then you search for class, this class designer tool, which I don't believe is in the Mac version but is in the Windows version, will allow you to generate UML from your code and generate code from your UML. So I'm also going to check that. And then I'm going to hit install. And this will take a little while, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this and come back when it's done. So at this point, my installation is finished and it's popping open the Visual Studio window. If that doesn't pop up for you directly, then you can search on your computer for Visual Studio 2019 and open it up manually. You can sign in, or here I'm just going to bypass the sign in. And then I'm going to set up my color mode to be dark. May take a few minutes to set up. Again, this is a virtual machine, so it's going to be a bit slower, hopefully, than your machine. And finally, it opens. So here, I'm just going to create a new project. And we've talked about it in class a little bit, the .NET Core versus .NET Framework. Going forward, pretty much I want everyone to be using .NET Core, and that'll be the starter files and solutions that I give you will be in .NET Core project. So if you're looking for the template, you can search for .NET Core, and then you want the one that has the little C# console app, select that, click Next. And what I would recommend doing if this is your first time setting up Visual Studio on your machine for this class, create a folder somewhere on your machine and put it on my desktop. We'll call this ITP Spring 2020. And when you create a new project, make sure to place it in that folder so that you have all of your projects together. I'm going to go ahead and create it. And Visual Studio will pop open with this new project. Should be able to run it. It'll take a second on this machine to actually run. Woohoo, finally it ran. Okay, so once you're in Visual Studio, the other thing I want to show you is if maybe you messed up setting up those workloads. And this flow is going to look different if you're on a Mac. This is the Windows flow. If you're on a Mac, you should have everything you need just from that initial install. But if you forgot to install something and you're on Windows, go to Tools, get Tools and Features, and this is going to pop open the Visual Studio installer. And it's going to give us that same window that we saw when we installed, where we could choose individual components or workloads. And if we wanted to suddenly do node development, we could check this, hit modify. It'll ask us to close Visual Studio, but then it'll install all the things we need to do, in this case, node development. So if you forgot to check something like the .NET, you can come back and check it, or you can go into the individual components. And if you're trying to install the class designer, you can do that after installing Visual Studio. And that's pretty much all you need. You should be able to then have Visual Studio running on your own machine and be able to create .NET Core projects. And this is the best way for you to work on projects in this class, even though I'm going to show you a couple of other ways to work on projects. If you can get this set up, this is best.